July 4, 1946. Biskupia Gorka Hill, Gdansk. 11 wooden gallows stand against the skyline. Below them, a crowd of 200,000 people. They came to watch the final act of the Stutthof trials. This was the largest public execution of Nazi criminals in post-war Poland. 11 figures stand on the back of military trucks. Nooses are already fixed. The geometry is precise. Each truck is positioned exactly under a crossbeam. The condemned are silent. 25-year-old Ewa Paradies stands among them. Once a regular girl from a small town, now a statistical unit of the collapse. The crowd waits. Military drivers start the engines. A simultaneous roar of heavy diesel fills the air. The vibration shakes the wooden platforms. The trucks lurch forward. 11 bodies drop into the summer heat. The rope snap is lost in the engine noise. Justice takes the form of 11 vertical lines. Executioners leave the site. The audience remains. The law had finished its work. Now, the investigation moves backward to the beginning, to the administrative shift that made this possible, to the moment a free city ceased to exist. Gears of the state began to turn. 9 years before the trucks reached Biskupia Gorka, the Baltic coast underwent a silent administrative purge. The free city of Danzig existed only on paper. De facto power shifted long before the first shots of the war. Albert Forster took control in 1937. He was the Gauleiter, a fanatic. His task was simple: dismantle the city's neutrality. He purged local institutions. He synchronized the police. By 1938, the swastika flew over every administrative building in the Polish corridor. How fast does a region change its skin? For Danzig, the process took 4 years. Propaganda filled the vacuum. Radios blared speeches. Textbooks taught hatred as biology. The free city became a laboratory for German nationalism and systemic anti-Semitism. Every social structure bent toward a single purpose. The state was not just governing, it was preparing the population. In 1939, the administration issued the first mobilization orders for civilian staff. In this political environment, a new taxpayer appeared at Neue Strasse 100 in 1920. Ewa Paradies was born on December 17th. The location was Lauenburg, a small town in Pomerania. The registry recorded her birth in a typical Protestant church. It was a standard demographic event for the Weimar Republic. Her father held ordinary jobs. The family followed traditional routines. Ewa was a statistical unit in a nation of millions. She was a product of her environment, showing no early signs of deviation. By 1935, her formal integration into the state changed. At 14, she finished her basic schooling. Her education ended. She entered the labor market as an unskilled worker with limited prospects. Ewa Paradies held the status of a common laborer. While Ewa Paradies was finishing her schooling, SS engineers were drafting blueprints for a site 34 kilometers east of Danzig. They chose a swamp. The location provided natural isolation. Why build a camp on a marsh? The mud and dense woods acted as a physical barrier against escape. On September 2, 1939, the site became operational. It was the first Nazi concentration camp established outside the pre-war borders of the Reich. On the first day, the gates opened for 150 Polish intellectuals and political leaders. Within 2 weeks, the population surged to 6,000. The ground was saturated. The smell of rotting vegetation and stagnant water seeped into the wooden floorboards of the early barracks. By January 1942, the site transitioned from a local internment center to an official concentration camp. The infrastructure evolved with the bureaucracy of murder. In 1943, the administration added the gas chamber and a crematorium. The facility was no longer just a prison, it was a machine. 110,000 people would eventually pass through this perimeter. This figure equaled the entire population of a mid-sized German city at the time. In July 1944, the logistics shifted again. 2,500 Jewish prisoners arrived from Auschwitz in a single transport. Then came 23,000 more. As the Soviet army pushed west, another 25,000 arrived from Baltic camps. By mid-January 1945, the main camp alone held 25,000. Low-skilled labor became a resource for the mobilization. Ewa Paradies was part of this workforce. For nearly a decade, she drifted through industrial zones. Her biography was a list of unremarkable positions. No career, no status. The factories defined her routine. In Wuppertal, the air stayed thick with dust and heat. The rhythmic roar of weaving looms drowned out conversation. Work was a mechanical process. Shift after shift, she remained at the bottom of the hierarchy. From Wuppertal to Erfurt, then to Lauenburg. She moved between shops and production lines, never rising above her station. Unmarried and unremarkable, she represented the millions of working-class Germans without a clear direction. She was a statistical unit in the Reich's labor pool. History required administrators for the camps. Obscure lives offered the best material for new roles. For Ewa, the absence of prospects made the state's offer attractive. She was ready for the recruitment. By 1944, the logistics of death at Stutthof reached a breaking point. The camp infrastructure failed to handle the volume of corpses. 2,500 prisoners died every 10 days. By January 1945, the daily mortality rate hit 250. The crematorium ovens ran 24 hours a day. The bricks glowed, the grates warped. Still, the piles grew. When the mechanical throughput fell below the rate of incoming bodies, the administration switched to primitive methods. Efficiency dictated the new process. Guards dug massive pits in the new camp section. They stacked corpses like lumber. Layers of human remains alternated with logs soaked in heavy fuel oil. Black smoke covered the Baltic sky. The smell of burning flesh became a permanent atmospheric element. Sanitary systems collapsed entirely. Typhus tore through the barracks during the winter of 1944. The epidemic turned the overcrowding into a biological chain reaction. The camp functioned as a machine, operating at 300% capacity. Maintenance was impossible. The administration responded to the chaos with a transfer of personnel. Ewa completed her brief orientation. In October 1944, the SS command signed her deployment orders. They moved Ewa Paradies to the subcamp at Bromberg-Ost. By August 1944, the German labor market was exhausted. The SS required thousands of new overseers to manage the expanding camp system. Voluntary recruitment had failed. To fill the gaps, the administration launched a mechanism of forced conscription. The process was purely bureaucratic. Official summons arrived at the doorsteps of women in Danzig and neighboring cities. Ewa Paradies received her notice that month. She was 23 years old. The state categorized her not as a volunteer, but as a mandatory resource for the concentration camp system. The logistics moved quickly. Authorities assigned Paradies to the Bromberg-Ost subcamp, located in the city of Bydgoszcz. This facility, designated as SK3, required a specific contingent of female personnel to oversee the growing prisoner population. A train transported her to Stutthof for specialized training. The curriculum was standardized. It focused on breaking the will of prisoners and maintaining absolute administrative control. The transformation from a civilian into an Aufseherin followed a strict schedule. The transition took exactly 6 weeks. Ewa's training ended just as the liquidation of the camp infrastructure began. The system shifted from exploitation to erasure. January 1945. The Soviet winter offensive broke the German lines. At the Stutthof headquarters, the air grew thick with acrid soot. Officers fed filing cabinets into furnaces. Black smoke drifted over the frozen parade grounds as personnel destroyed the paper trail of 5 years of genocide. The administration prioritized the elimination of witnesses over the preservation of life. While the guards prepared to flee, they drove the prisoners into the snow. In April 1945, Paradies joined a transport to the Lauenburg subcamp. She did not stop. Amidst the total collapse of the Third Reich, she continued to select prisoners for execution. Contrast defines the final weeks. The SS officers packed their bags in panic, yet the guards maintained the brutal mechanics of the gallows. Chaos at the top, precision at the bottom. The statistics of the retreat mirrored the losses of a front-line defeat. The mortality rate during these evacuations reached 60%. This exceeded the casualty rates of many combat units in the Wehrmacht. Soviet forces entered the main camp on May 9, 1945. They found only 100 survivors hidden in the ruins. The rest remained on the roads. Between 63,000 and 65,000 people died in the Stutthof system. 60%. In December 1944, Alice Orlowski's cruelty shifted from administrative control to a mechanical experiment in human endurance. The temperature in Stutthof dropped below freezing. Orlowski ordered female prisoners to assemble. The process followed a precise sequence. First, the command to strip. Skeletal fingers fumbled with buttons and threadbare rags. Then, the bodies stood exposed. Naked skin met the December wind. Thermal shock began instantly. At sub-zero temperatures, a wet body loses heat 25 times faster than a dry one. Orlowski watched the shivering. Then came the buckets. She tilted the rim. The sound of ice-cold water splashing against the frozen mud signaled the start of the torture. The water hit the skin. The respiratory system failed first. The prisoners gasped, their lungs seizing as the cold paralyzed the diaphragm. Instinct took over. The women tried to huddle or shield their chests from the wind. Orlowski viewed these survival reflexes as a breach of discipline. She moved in with a whip. She struck the wet, freezing flesh. Each blow landed on a body already dying from hypothermia. This was not a singular outburst. Witnesses later testified that the 24-year-old guard turned the procedure into a daily routine. She repeated the cycle of dousing and beating until the victims collapsed. The buckets were always refilled. The beatings continued until the last woman stopped moving. This sequence repeated every morning. The civilian life Ewa Paradies sought in Lauenburg was a phantom. Polish officers ended the charade in May 1945. Arrest. Transport to Gdansk. After months of evasion, she faced the protocol of a military tribunal. The Polish Special Criminal Court convened on April 25, 1946. It was a joint Soviet-Polish authority. The mission: legal qualification of the Stutthof system. Flashbulbs blinded the courtroom as the first major trial began. 13 defendants occupied the dock, 1 commandant, 6 male capos, 5 female SS guards. The demographic was younger than many expected. Ewa Paradies stood among them. She was 25 years old. Beside her sat Jenny Wanda Barkman, 24, Elizabeth Becker, 22, Wanda Klaff, 24. Gerda Steinhoff, also 24, held the highest rank as Oberaufseherin. 5 women in their early 20s. Under different circumstances, they would be raising families or working in shops. Instead, they faced 5 weeks of testimony regarding crimes against humanity. The youngest defendant was 22 years old. The investigation moved from the forests of Lauenburg to the sterile atmosphere of the courtroom. Prosecutors built the case on visual evidence. Photographs from the case files became the foundation for every interrogation. 13 defendants faced the Polish Special Criminal Court. The process lasted 5 weeks. Day after day, Stutthof survivors took the witness stand. They spoke of constant violence and the mechanics of selection. One witness recounted the protocol for those deemed unfit. Forced stripping in sub-zero temperatures. Ice water poured over bare skin. Systematic beatings. The defense followed a rigid script. All 13 pleaded not guilty. They cited the chain of command. They claimed they had no choice. They accused the survivors of exaggeration. The female guards initially treated the tribunal as a social event. Observers noted their behavior. They arranged their hair. They whispered and laughed. Jenny Wanda Barkman became a focal point of this defiance. She flirted with her guards. In the heavy silence of the room, Barkman giggled during the reading of the atrocities. The atmosphere shifted as the evidence mounted. It became a documented mountain of crime. The defendants' expectations of a quick release began to collapse against the legal procedure. The reality of the gallows replaced the illusion of immunity. The court reached its decision on May 31st. The verdict arrived on May 31st, 1946. The court found all 13 defendants guilty. 11 received the death penalty. This included all 5 female guards. Only 2 avoided the gallows with prison terms. Why make the execution public? The newspaper Dziennik Bałtycki provided the answer: edification. The authorities transformed the sentence into a state act of justice. The message had to be unmistakable. The court singled out Ewa Paradies. Her torture methods caused direct prisoner deaths. The judges ruled her brutality merited the ultimate punishment. The condemned began writing letters. They begged for clemency. Elizabeth Becker sent multiple appeals to Polish President Bolesław Bierut. She claimed she was less cruel than the others. The court even recommended commuting her sentence to 15 years. They cited her shorter time at the camp. President Bierut rejected every appeal. The executions were set for July 4th at Biskupia Gorka Hill. The site held strategic and dark significance. During the occupation, the Germans ran a prisoner of war camp on these heights. Now the location served a different purpose. News of the public hangings spread across the region. July 4th, 1946, dawned warm and clear. Crowds began filling the slopes of Biskupia Gorka before noon. 50,000 people. They came by foot, by truck, and by cart. The Polish press recorded the scale: 50,000 witnesses for 11 gallows. Among them sat the survivors of Stutthof. They wanted to see the end of their tormentors. Beside them stood children and curiosity seekers. The atmosphere was not a funeral, it was a spectacle. Engineers had prepared the site. They erected a specific timber complex. 4 T-shaped double gallows flanked the perimeter. In the center stood a triple structure: 11 ropes for 11 prisoners. The design allowed for a simultaneous execution. Why choose this specific construction? It was not built for efficiency. Professional executioners like Albert Pierpoint used the long drop. A calculated fall, a broken neck, instant death. Here, the authorities rejected the trapdoor. They chose the short drop. No fall, no snap of the vertebrae. This method ensured slow strangulation. The condemned would remain conscious. They would struggle for minutes. Suffocation would happen in full view of the crowd. The physics of the gallows turned an execution into a measured agony. The sound of engines cut through the heat. 11 trucks entered the perimeter. The afternoon sun hit the Biskupia Gorka Hill as the convoy arrived. 11 trucks backed into the execution perimeter. They moved in reverse, positioning the rear platforms directly under the gallows beams. Jenny Wanda Barkman and Ewa Paradies stood on one truck. Gerda Steinhoff, Elizabeth Becker, and Wanda Klaff occupied the next. The remaining vehicles held Commandant Johann Pauls and 5 Polish kapos. Each prisoner stood on the open flatbed. The nooses were already tightened around their necks. The ropes stretched upward, anchored to the timber cross-sections. The engines hummed. Exhaust fumes drifted over the grass. Barkman stood at the far end of the row. She remained motionless. Paradies stared at the 50,000 faces in the crowd. The spectators pressed against the security lines. The logistics were precise. Every truck was a trapdoor. Every driver was an executioner. The mechanical rumble filled the silence. 11 drivers shifted into gear. The engines roared to life. The drivers released the clutches. 11 engines surged at once. The trucks lurched forward, slowly, inching away from under the prisoners' feet. Jenny Wanda Barkman fell first. One truck moved faster than the others. In the photographs, her body is already mid-swing, suspended in the air. Next to her, Ewa Paradies remains standing on the edge of the flatbed. She watches the drop. She knows her own moment is seconds away. Then, the second truck clears the perimeter. Paradies drops. The rope snaps taut against her neck. Her legs kick at the air. It is a purely autonomic response. The brain demands solid ground. There is only gravity. Commandant Johann Pauls occupies the center of the triple gallows. Gerda Steinhoff hangs in the foreground. Behind them, 5 male capos sway in a precise line, stretching back toward the silent crowd. 11 bodies now fight the same physics. This was a short drop hanging. The neck does not break. The spinal cord remains intact. There is no instant darkness. Instead, there is only strangulation. The weight of the body becomes the executioner. It pulls the noose tight, collapsing the trachea and crushing the carotid arteries. Blood flow to the brain slows to a trickle. Oxygen disappears. How long does it take to die? 5 minutes, 10, sometimes 15. Asphyxia is a slow mechanical failure of the lungs and heart. 10,000 people watched the rhythmic twitching of the limbs. The struggle lasted until the last reflex faded. Photographers captured the scene from multiple angles. These images still circulate today. The cameras captured the finality. These images remain. But the most brutal detail was not the lens. It was the hands on the steering wheels. Former Stutthof prisoners volunteered for the task. They didn't just watch. They acted as executioners. Victims pulled the trucks from under the feet of their tormentors. For the survivors, this was the only possible closure. They watched 5 women who had beaten, tortured, and selected their families for death. Now, the power dynamic inverted. The guards were weight. The prisoners were the law. Ewa Paradies stood at the end of the line. She was the last to die. The rope tightened on Biskupia Gorka Hill. She was 25 years old. Why does this number matter? It was the average age of her victims. Paradies died at the exact peak of her life, the same peak she had systematically erased in the camps. She became the youngest of the 5 female guards to hang that day. Her body swayed in the summer breeze until the physics of death took over. 11 bodies hung motionless under the afternoon sun. The crowd dispersed. No state funeral followed. No elaborate burials for the fallen of the Reich. Authorities treated the remains with the same disregard the guards had shown their victims. Documentation suggests the bodies went to the Danzig Anatomical Institute for research, or they were simply burned. No ceremonies, no markers, no names. The system erased their physical presence. There are no graves to visit. The trial and execution were over. Memory began to fade into the archives. The execution of 11 people was only the first act. It exposed a deeper mechanism of systemic selection. Ewa Paradies was not born a guard. She was a factory worker, a common face in a crowd of millions. Was she a sadist from birth? No. The Nazi system did not look for monsters. It looked for efficiency. The Reich created a social elevator powered by blood. Cruelty became a professional skill. In the winter of 1945, the temperature in Stutthof dropped to -20 degrees. Paradies did not just follow orders, she innovated. She forced naked women into the yard. She personally doused them with buckets of ice water. This was not a command from Berlin, it was her personal initiative. The system rewarded this behavior with promotions. Mercy led to reassignment or the front lines. Brutality led to power. The transition from civilian to executioner followed a precise logic. The ideology stripped the victims of their humanity. The peer pressure of the SS guards eliminated hesitation. Paradies found she enjoyed the weight of the whip. Absolute power over life and death became her new career path. She traded her factory overalls for a uniform. She exchanged a meager wage for the right to kill. Witnesses saw her smile during the beatings. She made her choice in the freezing mud of the camp. On the gallows of Biskupia Gorka, she paid the final invoice for that decision. The gallows at Biskupia Gorka were only the first chapter. 11 executions did not close the case. They opened a legal war that lasted decades. Between 1946 and 1953, Poland conducted 6 separate trials. Judges focused on the staff and guards of Stutthof and its satellite subcamps. More sentences followed, more ropes tightened. The pursuit of justice ignored the calendar. Did the passage of time grant immunity? It did not. The German legal system took over the relay in the 21st century. In 2020, a former guard stood before a judge. He was 93 years old. In 2022, The court convicted a 97-year-old woman. She was a secretary. Her crime was administrative. She processed the paperwork of death, making her an accessory to mass murder. The camp itself changed owners. Soviet forces initially converted the barracks into a prison for German captives. Later, the infrastructure faced demolition. Much of the steel and wood vanished. In 1962, the Polish government intervened. They established a museum on the site of the former barbed wire. Visitors now walk through the remaining barracks. They see the crematorium. They enter the gas chamber. Stutthof remains a silent witness. The museum operates educational programs for new generations. The objective is strict. The documentation is precise. Memory acts as the final barrier against repetition. Every record serves the same tally: 65,000. The record of 65,000 victims demands a witness. But the evidence of their retribution creates a chilling paradox. The photographs from the Stutthof execution in July 1946 remain accessible in digital archives. One search query reveals the final moments of Ewa Paradies. Many websites now hide these files behind sensitive content warnings. They are a documented record of the end. The frames capture a singular sensory detail: bodies twisting in mid-air against a backdrop of a silent, massive crowd. Historians face a divide over these images. One side demands a ban, citing the graphic dehumanization of the dying. The other insists on preservation. They view the film as forensic proof. It is the only visual evidence that the system of slaughter reached its logical conclusion. The lens recorded 10,000 people watching 11 gallows. It fixed the reality of the consequence into the grain of the paper. Justice was not an abstraction. It was a physical act on a Polish hillside. The gallows on the Polish hillside were not an end to the story. They were a data point. Sociologists later defined this as the banality of evil. Ewa Paradies was not a biological anomaly. She was a standard result of a functioning system. 6 weeks. That is the recorded time for a complete psychological transformation. Paradies did not need years of indoctrination. She needed a uniform and a perimeter. Under specific environmental pressures, the transition from a civilian to a perpetrator follows a predictable mechanical curve. Look at the person at the cash register, the passenger on the bus, the co-worker in the next cubicle. Statistics suggest that in a shifting political climate, a significant percentage of these ordinary people will adapt to a violent hierarchy within 42 days. This is the mechanism of Stutthof. It functions when hatred becomes a policy and dehumanization becomes a routine. The defense is not a change in nature, but a refusal of the process. Every individual maintains the capacity for a hard stop. One person chooses to walk away. The execution of Ewa Paradies did not balance the scales. It merely stopped the clock at 25 years. Behind that number lies a void. Her victims never reached 25. Others had survived years of systemic starvation, only to meet a young woman who found purpose in their agony. Paradies did not just follow orders. She traded her humanity for a specific biochemical reward. Power acts as a narcotic. For a former clerk, the transition from counting files to deciding who lives created an intoxicating rush. Cruelty became her primary function. Medical records and survivor testimonies from Stutthof confirm the pattern. She didn't kill out of necessity. She killed for the pleasure of the act. 65,000 people died in that camp. Children, the elderly, those who had already endured the impossible. They planned to rebuild. They expected to tell their stories. Instead, their lives ended in the mud because an ordinary girl discovered she liked the sound of a whip. The system did not fail Ewa Paradies. It revealed her. This transformation requires no special genetics. It only requires an environment where hatred is subsidized by the state. We look at the photographs and see a monster. History sees a neighbor. The mechanism of dehumanization remains available to anyone willing to pull the lever. Will the next generation recognize the signs before the gallows are built again?